Well, good Friday morning, everyone, and thank you once again for tuning in to yet another weekly Friday edition of the Alan Fitz podcast, also known as The Chat. Good morning, everyone. My name is Alan Fitz. I am the host for the program, and thank you for tuning in and welcome into the show. And as always, we would like to welcome in our three main listening audiences out there. These are the people that keep the show going, and number one, those that do agree about the topics and the subjects that we talk about here on the program. They do leave positive remarks out there in social media land, talking to their friends and family. Number two type listening audience, well, they don't quite agree with everything that we talk about, but they do leave constructive criticism out there, and we greatly appreciate that. And of course, last but not least, the haters out there that can't see the forest for the trees. And you know what, ladies and gentlemen? My haters are my motivators. This is what keeps the chat going every week. Again, welcome into the show, live from our studios here in Amarillo, Texas. Speaking of Amarillo, Texas, this is where the topic of discussion is coming from today. And let me first of all say good morning to all of our Amarillo resident listeners out there. How many of you out there know where the only 24-hour-a-day supermarket / grocery store is here in Amarillo? Well, of course, everyone will tell you that's the United Supermarket. It's at the corner of Bell and 45th Avenue, but that's not the topic that we're talking about today. It's what sits behind the United Supermarket, and that is a place called Asher Point. I want to throw up two names that you will hear again on this podcast this morning. Kathleen Michael and Ken Hines. Okay, you will hear those two names again later on in the show. Again, those names are Kathleen Michael and Ken Hines. One is local, one is not. About a year ago, folks, on social media, and you know how people are on social media, okay? People, you can be whoever you want to be on social media. If you want to be President Donald Trump, you can be President Donald Trump on social media. You can just be whoever you want to be. I began noticing, and again, I want everybody to understand that you can't believe everything that you read on social media, okay? I'm one of those people. I don't believe most of anything that I read on social media unless I can verify it. And 9 times out of 10, there's really nothing to verify because there's, well, as we all know, there's not a lot to it. I began noticing there were some very disturbing remarks from different folks. I don't know if these people were all from the Amarillo area, if they were from the Canyon area, if they were down around Lubbock. Could be from North Texas, as far as I know, the Dallas area. I don't know, to be honest with you. But I started noticing that and basically what this is, it's not an assisted living facility. It is definitely not a nursing home. It is just a place where elderly people reside. And folks, I know I'm probably going to offend a lot of you by saying this, but a lot of times, and hell, some of y'all may not even know this on this podcast, but there's a lot of people out there, there's a lot of families out there that do not want to accept the responsibility of people aging in their family. And what I'm describing is possibly a mother or a father that is aging in the process, maybe soiling their undergarments and things like that. A lot of family members, well, it's not to say that they're not trained on how to do it. A lot of them just don't want to take the responsibility. You know, you've probably heard in your lifetime, well, I love my mother to death, I'll do anything in the world for her. Well, yeah, until a certain part of her life begins to depreciate, if you will. She begins soiling her underwear, urinating on herself. Well, now that changes a lot of people's minds, okay? And folks, I'm just using this as an example. Truth be told, where a lot of these people wind up in these living facilities for the elderly is because the son or the daughter doesn't want to fool with them. And they put them in these places to where they don't have to deal with them. They would rather pay thousands of dollars a month rather than to clean them up. And again, we're using that as an example. So, Asher Point in Amarillo on Bell Street, I'm going to assume is no different than any other. And I want to call this, and I don't know if it's the correct name to call it. I want to call it, for the purposes of this podcast here on the chat, I want to call it an elderly living facility, or ELF for short, ELF. For the purposes of this show, we're going to call it an ELF, an elderly living facility. Now, getting back to where I was earlier, I began seeing a lot of posts that were generating on social media of an elderly living facility known as Asher Point, Amarillo. Now, I'm adding Amarillo into that, but it's basically Asher Point. Did a little bit of research on exactly what an Asher Point was, and it is actually a division of the Segoria Healthcare facility that is headquartered down in Fort Worth. And I use the word healthcare facility. That may be the wrong terminology. I don't really care if it is or not. But it is, Segoria is basically an ELF, if you will. It's an elderly living facility generator. They have offices, or rather facilities, all over the United States. But they are headquartered right there in Tarrant County of Fort Worth. So, again, I began reading, and of course, you know, at first, when I started seeing, or started reading, if you will, some of these disparaging comments that were being made about Asher Point here in Amarillo, I thought, well, more than likely this is probably somebody that's disgruntled. It could be a resident that's in the facility, or it could be the family of somebody that didn't get their way on something. And I kind of shrugged it off, but as time went on, it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I got to thinking to myself, ladies and gentlemen, how can this many people that probably don't even know each other start leaving the kind of comments that they were leaving on Facebook? And I'll give you primarily a little memory of what some of the things were that I read. Unsanitary conditions, management concerns, basically residents were having some issues. Management was turning deaf ears to their complaints, yada yada this, yada yada that. And it just went on and on and on, and I'm thinking, well, again, maybe this is somebody that's just disgruntled, okay? With a capital D, disgruntled. It kind of calmed down for a very short period of time. And then one of the remarks that I remember that was being made, or rather that I read on social media about Asher Point, HIPAA violation. That's when the red flag, folks, came up in my mind. HIPAA violation. Now, everybody knows what HIPAA is. I'm not going to go into that. But that is what turned my eye to Asher Point. I knew it wasn't a hospital setting. I knew it wasn't this. I knew it wasn't that. But yet, you know, they have the right to privacy too. Okay? So, I thought to myself, maybe we need to look into this, because they were getting a lot of complaints from different residents and even what I'm assuming to be family members in and outside of the facility. Well, unfortunately, in a situation like this, you're not going to have a lot of luck trying to pinpoint something that's going on, okay? You're only going to get limited information. So, I visited the facility one day. And one of the things that you notice when you first walk into the door is a sign-in book, is what I like to call it. It's about as big as what you would find at maybe a funeral, that you're paying the respects to the deceased and you sign your name. It's very, very small in nature. It was on a desk as you first went into the facility. And you were required to sign in to whoever you're visiting. You sign your name and the room number, okay? You don't put down who you're going to see. And I guess that, and I'm not in the medical field, folks, I don't know, but I guess that would be maybe part of HIPAA. I don't know. But who you were visiting, their room number. I knew right then that, well, I didn't have anybody in there that was kin to me. I didn't know anybody that was in there. So I did not sign my name. And I pretty well turned around and exited the facility, went back in my vehicle and left the property. And I said, we're going to have to do another approach to this. Time went on, and I don't remember exactly how long time was. Maybe 3 weeks, maybe a month. I don't know. I didn't keep track of it. And I started noticing, and had already noticed prior, that they had lost 2 shuttle bus drivers at this facility. And these were back to back pretty quick. And anyway, I learned later on the first driver wasn't there but maybe a couple of months. The new management took over. then this female driver got hired, and she didn't stay but maybe 2 weeks and was gone. And that also was a red flag to me. Like, why aren't they able to keep shuttle bus drivers? And that's exactly what that thing is that sits out there to the side of the main facility at Asher Point. It's a shuttle bus. And I'll get into what they do on a shuttle bus here in a little bit later in the show. Did not know anything about the shuttle bus. I didn't know anything about anything to deal with Asher Point, but I do know that a lot of these shuttle buses that they use and I'll use the word tote, T-O-T-E, that they tote these residents around in, like going to doctor's appointments, maybe going to Walmart, maybe going to the dentist. A lot of the female residents maybe going to the hair salon to get their hair done, or whatever the case may be. I know a lot of those shuttle buses, and here in Amarillo, I do know for a fact that you are required to have a CDL, a commercial driver's license, with a passenger endorsement, which I do have, along with many other endorsements, if you will. But getting back, so I'm like, maybe one of the ways that I can find out or start at least a private investigation on where all these complaints are coming from is to get my foot in the door and get into Asher Point. And this is going to give me the leeway that I need. So, ladies and gentlemen, basically what I did is I went on the internet and found their website. And I applied to be a shuttle bus driver. It didn't take them long to call me. And the individual that did call me, and you will remember me using this name at the beginning of the podcast, her name was Kathleen Michael. Okay, and she just recently took over Asher Point. I don't know where this woman came from. I don't know where she used to work. I don't know anything about her. And we visited. I went to the facility. She called me down there, basically interviewed me on the spot and hired me on the spot. And of course, you can't blame Miss Michael because she didn't really know what she was doing. Okay, she had no idea that I'm a professional podcaster. She had no idea that I was about to investigate this facility that she supposedly is the executive director over. She had no idea, folks. And of course, I didn't say anything and wasn't going to say anything. About 3 days later, and of course, anytime that for those of you out there listening that don't know, anytime you go to work for a facility like that, you undergo an extensive background history. They check you for all kinds of things. You have to undergo that. You have to undergo, of course, you're in a driving position of a shuttle bus with passengers on it. I mean, it's other lives in your hand. In addition to a criminal record search, they're also going to be checking your driving record. Okay, so all that. I have nothing on my record. Driving record is clean. Of course, I have CDLs. I have to keep it clean. And it didn't take Kathleen Michael long to say, you know what, you're hired. We need you. We don't have a shuttle driver. And, you have CDLs, but actually, folks, I didn't need CDLs to do this. It was only 13 passengers. The CDL with a passenger endorsement kicks in is when it's 15 passengers, including the driver for hire. That's what the federal DOT says. This was 13 passengers, including the driver, so the CDL was not required. So myself and Kathleen Michael sat down, and they brought this rather, and I don't know exactly the right word to describe this woman. She was kind of a particular looking individual. She was apparently, by what I was told, she was over the maintenance department, and for privacy reasons, and not to disrespect anyone, I'm only going to use her first name. Michelle is what her first name was. And she was, really to describe her, she was a shady looking female, okay? She was one of these type people. Folks, have you ever got up, met somebody for the first time and got a bad impression of them? I mean, normally, from where I come from, and even today, I can be around somebody 5 minutes, and I can tell you, whether this person is even worth dealing with. And it took me less than 5 minutes with this Michelle character to know that me and her gonna clash, okay? She was one of these people that gave me the impression that she knew everything about everything. And strutted around and this, that, and the other. And we'll get back to her here in a little bit. So, the hire date was set, the beginning start date was set, and I started. And I waited about a week. I wanted to keep a very low key, I wanted to keep a very low profile by what I was doing. I did not want to give any detection to Kathleen Michael that we're investigating this facility. And of course, me being in radio as many years as I've been in it, and being an investigative reporter, I know the techniques that are needed to be used to keep down suspicion. And I was able to do this throughout my tenure with Asher Point. I began driving some of these residents around. We would go to different places. Walmart, a lot of them went to Walmart, and then they would complain that the bus, and this is the way it was. They had a Pacific time that they got picked up, and they had a Pacific time that they got re-picked up from a location. And what a lot of these residents did not understand is that sometimes a curveball gets thrown at you. You get caught up in traffic. Of course, with the way people drive around Amarillo, there's accidents daily. Cars, trucks being flipped over, lanes being blocked off, police detouring traffic, whatever the case may be. And you're 2 minutes late picking someone up, and you just get bawled out because of it. And, that just goes with the job, ladies and gentlemen. You got to let something like that just roll off your shoulder. But Kathleen Michael, being the executive director that she was, again, someone that appeared to me that she knew everything about everything, needed to know the slightest little thing that the residents were doing. I mean, folks, it got to the point of her knick-knack talking, and we're again referring to Kathleen Michael. Basically, if one of the residents got on the shuttle bus and broke wind, she would want to know about it. I mean, I'm dead serious with this. It was just nitpicking. During this time that I'm the shuttle bus driver for the facility, again, going to Walmart, going to the dialysis center, going to the hair salon, going to the nail salon, wherever we're going, I began listening to Residents Talk. And of course, when I first started at Asher Point, of course, every resident in there wanted to know who I was. He's the new driver. Maybe we've got somebody in here that's got some sense. And yada yada, this, that, and the other. Again, as time went on, I began hearing the residents talk nothing really positive about Asher Point. And they began opening up to me, not the other way around that a lot of you think we would do. We would open up to them first. I knew I couldn't do that because I was basically undercover. So I let the residents start coming to me first, and they did. One of the things that I do remember hearing about firsthand, and again, and yes, HIPAA is involved in this as far as privacy concerns, so I'm not legally able to give anyone's names out or any particulars or details about the residents, even though I do remember their names. I'm not going to do that. One of the residents in particular, and I'm not going to say whether this was male or female, but and I like to call it a field trip because this is what a lot of the residents referred to it as, is getting away from the hellhole that they called it. They literally called Asher Point a hellhole, ladies and gentlemen. It was total hell for them. Even to take them a city block down the street to a hair salon would be known to them as a field trip of joy. And this is what a lot of the female residents of ELF, the Elderly Living Facility of Asher Point, called this. They were glad to see me when I showed up for work in the mornings because they knew I was their ticket out of Hell Point. I'll call it Hell Point instead of Asher Point. One of the major complaints that I do remember hearing between some of the residents talking on the shuttle bus was toilet paper. One of the residents indicated that they had to go down 5 times, ladies and gentlemen, F-I-V-E, 5 times, and ask for toilet paper from Kathleen Michael. A deaf ear was turned. They finally had to sign up for this field trip to go to Walmart to buy their toilet paper, okay? They couldn't get any. During the time that I was there, most of the residents complained about the cafeteria food. And let me explain the term cafeteria before you get confused on something. I know a lot of you hearing the word cafeteria, you're remembering your old school days where you went and got a tray and you slid it down these aluminum bars and it looked like mash, putting gruel in a plate and just slapping it down and giving it to them. That's not the case here. The cafeteria was located on the 3rd floor of the Asher Point facility on Bell Street. They had these people that were in here that you would think would use a different terminology for their job position. They had them dressed up in culinary attire, okay? And I'm not sure why they did that. These people were a long, long, long way from being culinary, okay? But this is how they addressed themselves. The cooks were very arrogant. It was almost like it was a burden for them to even be at work. They did not seem to care anything about the residents. They basically wanted to feed them and get them gone. Okay, it was almost the attitude like, hurry up and eat your lunch and go take a nap. Okay, get out of my cafeteria. It wasn't really a cafeteria. It was a huge dining room. And again, it was on the third floor. It was very untidy upstairs. It was very dusty. And I can't really blame that on Asher Point itself, folks, because there's a lot of dust that blows up here in the Texas Panhandle, especially here in Amarillo. And cleaning is essential daily. But some of this dust that I noticed is especially in the windowsills at this so-called cafeteria, they called it. It was deep enough you could plant potatoes in it and it would sprout, okay? It was not as clean as you would expect a decent elderly living facility would be. They did lack hygiene of cleaning maintenance, if you will. So all of these people would have to go up to the third floor. And of course they did have, they had residences, the rooms up on the third floor. It was first, second, and third floor residents. Of course, if they lived on the first and second floor, they had to use the elevator to gain access. So they would go up to the cafeteria, and they had these menus that they would order from, and it was almost like you walked into a Denny's diner, if you will. They had some of the employees that act as so-called quote-unquote waitresses, okay? And some of these people are about as Looney Tunes as you can get, okay? They had no idea what a true waitress really does. So they would go around and they would actually, and I actually, folks, heard this with my own ears and saw it with my own eyes. They would argue, these so-called waitress employees would argue with the residents. Well, you're ordering a hamburger today. You had a hamburger yesterday. You had a hamburger the day before. This is not good for you. Yada, yada, this, that, and the other. And I'm thinking to myself in my mind, you're not a dietitian. You're a so-called bottom floor waitress, if you will. What business is it of yours to tell these residents what they can eat and what they can't eat? Folks, I will tell you that for the most part, a lot of the employees that worked at Asher Point did not get along with each other. And none of them, none of the residents that I talked to in private, none of them liked Michelle at all. I mean, they hated Michelle's guts, ladies and gentlemen. They could not stand her. It's what I said earlier. She gave the impression that she knew everything about everything and thought she was God. Okay? You can't run a facility like that with employees that work there. One of the residents, I've got to be very careful what I say here. I will not name whether it's male or female, told me out of their own mouth that they would be glad the day that she was gone from that facility, because she was making this individual's life a living hell. This individual told me out of their own mouth on the shuttle bus that they had went to Kathleen Michael probably close to a dozen times. Oh, I'll talk to her, and then nothing changes. Again, folks, the deaf ears of management of Asher Point here in Amarillo. I took a tour one time. I was in between shuttle runs, dropping somebody off, go back to the facility, or maybe drop somebody at the facility, and then they had an appointment 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever the case may be, waiting around. So instead of sitting around, I decided, I've really never seen much of this place. Let's go take a walk. One of the places that I visited was the stairwell system. Folks, it was horrible. Trash, chewing gum, toilet paper in all three of the tiers of stairs that I went through. Hadn't looked like it'd been vacuumed. And these were carpeted stairs, folks. It looked like it hadn't been vacuumed probably in a month, maybe 2 months. I remember when I first started there, they went under construction in the lobby. And there wasn't anything wrong with the lobby. What was actually happening, and I found this later on, is that Segoria had to spend money to get a tax write-off. Okay, basically doing a little cheating on their taxes without cheating. Okay, they were looking for write-offs. So what they did is they remodeled the lobby. They had these Hispanic workers come in. It took them about 2 weeks to get it done. Put in new banisters, new lighting, and this so-called wallpaper with hairless horses on it. It was the most silliest thing that I can say I've seen since I've been in Amarillo, and I've been here 3.5 years. Don't know what they were trying to do. Called in the big shots from Fort Worth, and one of these individuals, and you heard his name earlier, his name was Ken Hines. Now this was Kathleen Michael's direct supervisor, from what I could understand. And he was not from Amarillo, folks. He's actually lived in Fort Worth. That's where he came out of. I believe he was actually some kind of regional supervisor for Asher Point, because all this man did is jumped on an airplane and flew from state to state and bossed people around, barking orders at people. Mr. Hines met his match when he came to me one day. Wanted to know why I was sitting out in the lobby talking to the residents. And Mr. Hines was not aware that I was on break. I give you a 30-minute break after you work, I don't remember, 4 or 5 hours. And I told Mr. Hines that I'm on break, I'm not on the clock, and it doesn't really matter what I'm doing. And, of course, folks, that conversation did not go well, but I prevailed in that conversation. Ken Hines, I guess the way to describe him was, he was a little bit of a Kathleen Michael and a little bit of a Michelle, but he accelerated. Ken Hines was an individual, and I only met him that one time. He definitely thought he was God and above, folks. He knew everything about everything. The problem is that Ken Hines didn't have the intelligence to know anything. So I knew, after being there this short period of time and seeing what I'm seeing, hearing what I'm hearing, that, yeah, this is worth doing a podcast on, and that's why we're doing it right now. I would also like to throw out to my listening audience out there that Kathleen Michael, out of her own mouth, told me, you will not do a podcast on Asher Point. And I'm here to tell Kathleen Michael and the rest of you out of my own mouth, you don't regulate what goes on this podcast. I do. Getting back to Asher Point. The complaints just did not stem from, again, can't get toilet paper after 5 tries, can't go somewhere when there's no driver, or when there is a shuttle driver, they're all booked up. Folks, I'm here to tell you that Asher Point is basically running the residents' lives in that facility. Remember earlier in the podcast, I used the term that one of the residents used as a hellhole. Now, some of these residents do have their own vehicles. They are allowed to come and go as they please. But the ones that do not have transportation are at the mercy of Asher Point. And Asher Point uses that mercy of those residents to their advantage. I remember there was an elderly lady. This woman was up in age, and I'm not going to give any indications of how old I thought she was or how old I know she is, because I have to protect their identities, okay? But she was up in age and told me that she had a doctor's appointment. It was very, very urgent for her to go to the doctor that day. And that the activity director, we're not even going to get into calling her name or anything about her, because that would be for another show. That's a completely different subject. She had about as much sense as God would give a goose in a hailstorm. Flat out told her, no, you're not going to the doctor today. We don't have a time slot to take you. That resident did the correct thing. They went through the chain of command and finally got up to Kathleen Michael. Kathleen Michael had the final say so. No, you're not going to the doctor. You're going to have to reschedule. Folks, what I'm getting at on this, there's only a certain number of hours that the shuttle bus operator operates. And I think we can all come to an understanding. If it's outside of hours, or the shuttle bus operator is not there, then, they're not going to take it upon themselves, like in their own personal vehicle, and they probably couldn't do it because of insurance purposes anyway. They're not going to haul these people around. That's what the shuttle bus operator does, the driver of the shuttle bus. I think we all have an understanding that if it's after hours, there is no shuttle bus driver there. No, you can't go. I think we all understand that. Folks, what we don't understand is for you to point blank look at a resident and tell them, no, you're not going. Ladies and gentlemen, that's not the way an executive director needs to approach residents at an elderly living facility such as Asher Point. She should be telling these folks, you need to make your appointment in advance to where we can get you there when the shuttle bus driver is here. They're trying to make appointments after hours for the next day. The driver's not coming in. And just point blank go up to them and say, you're not going anywhere. They are controlling these residents. And of course, I've seen this happen more than one time. And I actually saw one of the residents break down and start crying because she was told this in the tone of voice that she was told. I even offered to take this woman to the doctor myself on my own personal time. But unfortunately, I could not do that because I did not have the capabilities of taking them. And it was also against so-called company policy. Some of their policies that they had in place up there are absolutely ridiculous. Again, that's for another show. That's for another date. I'm not going to get into that. But Asher Point is a rule-by-book association. And what I mean by that is you follow the rules to a T, or you don't work there. I thought some of the rules were absolutely stupid. I ignored a lot of them. But I made it through it. And when I got enough information that I needed, I terminated myself. I will be man enough to step up to the plate and admit that, ladies and gentlemen. I walked out. I didn't show up for work. I went to work somewhere else. But folks, that wasn't the end of it. I needed more to go on. First of all, I wasn't going to stay in a place that had the most ridiculous rules I've ever heard of. And again, that's for a different show at a different time. But I had enough that I'd also been looking at the trucking position that I still have, and it was time to go there. But what Asher Point did not know, and you're about to find out, is that the investigation did not stop there. No, folks, it did not. One of the rules that Asher Point had is that as a former employee of the facility, you were not allowed back on the property unless you had written permission from the executive director. And you know, folks, I can relate to that. I know a lot of places that do that. I've heard of many, many places that do this. But that's okay that they did, because I began sending different people into Asher Point. I knew enough residents' names. I knew what their room number was. I knew what floor they were on. And I knew they would talk. We had to do it very low key. We had to do it very low profile. And ladies and gentlemen, I was successful with this. I will say that there were 3 different people that I sent in to Asher Point. They signed a fictitious name to the book. I had the telephone number of the residents that I wanted to interview. I had their cell phone number, okay? Never gave their cell phone number out to anyone. I never even kept their cell phone number in my cell phone. I had this in a separate location. I sent these people in to interview quickly questions that I had wrote down on a piece of paper to these pigeons, we'll call them, that I sent into the facility to question these residents about. In keeping in all privacy with all persons concerned. I will tell you, listeners out there, that for the most part, everyone that was interviewed, and folks, I can guarantee you to this date that no one will say they were interviewed. This is completely confidential. They all basically said the same thing, and that was they did not feel safe at Asher Point. They did not feel respected at Asher Point. And no matter what they told management, and we're talking about Kathleen Michael, it was deaf ears turned all the time. Kathleen Michael and Michelle in their little nest together. One of the residents that was interviewed by the Pigeon that was sent in did make the statement that all Kathleen Michael was worth as an executive director to Asher Point, Hell Point, whatever they called it, she was only there to draw a check. She had no concern, no compassion, no nothing for the residents at Asher Point. Ken Hines, the man I talked about earlier, this so-called regional area supervisor that didn't do anything but hop airplanes at the expense of the company and eat lavish foods and draw bukus of dollars for being arrogant. Didn't seem to me like he had any compassion for the residents of Asher Point either. I did find out that Ken Hines doesn't come to Amarillo very often, but that he does hop airplanes and fly all over the country and bark orders at people. He's one of these type people like Kathleen Michael that thinks they can't be touched. They can't do anything wrong. They cannot be terminated. I've got news for both of you idiots. Yes, you can. After I left Asher Point, ladies and gentlemen, and the Pigeons went in and did their interview, it's a shame. It's a crying shame. You know, a lot of these, even assisted living centers where they have nurses that come in or they have doctors that come in, and you hear about nursing homes where, you know, they leave a patient laying on their side, bed sores appear and all that. It's a shame. I've never really worked around the elderly that much. I'll step up to the plate and admit that on this podcast, right here on the chat. But when I went undercover at Asher Point, I can now understand why a lot of the residents there felt the way that they felt. Their families have put us here and forgotten about us. These people that work here, they don't give a damn about us. We've just been pushed out. You know, and I'm sure all of us have heard about stories like this. You really didn't think about what you were hearing. But when you've worked around it and you've seen it with your own eyes, folks, it'll hit home hard if you let it. I've seen some of those residents get back on the shuttle bus, me take them back to their home. And that's the way that Kathleen Michael made it sound. Well, this is the residents' home. We need to respect them. How do you respect them when you tell them they can't go to the doctor because whatever the reason is, you don't want to fool with them? What I have seen is pick a resident up, and as I'm taking them back to their so-called home of Asher Point, would be in tears on the shuttle bus. I would come to a red light and turn around and ask them, are you okay? And they say, no, I'm not okay. I don't want to go back there, but I don't have any other place to live. I don't want to go out in the street. I don't want to live under a bridge. I don't want to be homeless. Folks, that itself is a crying shame to see an elderly person that has worked all their life be faced with something like that. You saw in our title card about a week before this podcast came to be about management concerns, social media complaints, this, that, and the other. Before we get off the podcast today, I want to tell the families of those residents that are in Asher Point, you can have something done about these conditions at this place. The cleanliness, turning deaf ears to the residents, not listening to what they want. There are ways you can have something done about this. Lawyers, state representatives, community leaders. Go talk to them. See what can be done. I know times right now are hard. Gasoline prices are way up there. The cost of groceries are going up. It's hard on people. I understand that. We're all suffering. But don't let your elderly mother or father or whoever it is that is in one of these facilities like Asher Point suffer the way that they're suffering. If they're telling you that their needs are not being met, you need to address that. You need to come off your high horse and address that. If you can't get any satisfaction, you need to go to your state representative. You need to contact your attorney, see what they can do about this, because things can change in places like this. They can change in the blink of an eye. One other thing that I do want to throw up before we end this podcast, and I'm sure Amarillo doesn't know about this, but I will attest to it. I saw it with my own eyes. Yes, these people are of legal age, okay? Everybody's over the age of 21. But I just want to let everyone out there know that doesn't know this about Asher Point, Amarillo. If they're still doing it, and I'm pretty sure they are, I believe it was on a Thursday afternoon, they would have bingo. They are giving them alcohol, and I have seen several of the residents drunk in this facility. No, they don't get any assistance trying to get back to their room. I've seen them stagger down the hallways, completely drunk. I understand that they're over 21 years of age and they can make their own decision when it comes to something like this. But some of those people know that they shouldn't be drinking. A lot of them take medication. And I blame Asher Point and Kathleen Michael for doing this type of behavior in a bingo activity. Shame on you. Some of those people don't need to be drinking. Again, yes, we can all agree they're over 21 and they're making their own decision. But I want Kathleen Michael, Ken Hines, and Segoria Healthcare aware of something. You're feeding these people alcohol, getting them drunk. When one of them falls out there in the hallway and dies because of this, you're probably not going to have a job left, because the attorneys are going to rip you a new one and own that place. Asher Point, Amarillo. Deaf ears to the residents of that facility under new management. It is a shame and a disgrace. And folks, with that being said, that will wrap up this Friday weekly edition of The Chat. Coming up next Friday, my good friend, and actually he's my best friend here in Amarillo, Roy Camacho, will join me here in the studio. And he's going to talk about listening to your children. There's a lot of kids out there that have a lot of problems, and mom and daddy don't really take the time to sit down and listen to their children. Mr. Camacho is going to talk about a big mistake that he made in a marriage by not listening to his children. Now, he's closer to his son than he has ever been. It's an interview with my best friend, Roy Camacho, next Friday here on The Chat. With that being said, have a great Friday, have a wonderful weekend, and my friends, until we meet again next Friday, this is Alan Fitz saying bye for now.